Oh, it says that I am now live. So I guess that's what that means.
Here's hoping
Well, I'm
we
going to
are.
wait for the
No.
notification.
Consider the alternative.
Yes, you know what? My pap used to say the same thing while he was alive.
Mm.
He used to say, "Hey, life sucks, but it's better than the alternative." So,
What's the alternative then?
The alternative, my friend, is to not be alive anymore.
I've heard that also as growing old sucks, but it's better than the alternative.
Yeah,
You
indeed.
are live.
Yeah. So, okay. So for those of you watching, if you sense that something is a little different this time, that's because our wonderful friends and benefactors at Google decided to our corporate overlords at Google decided to discontinue their widely used and incredibly popular Hangouts on Air product, leaving those of us who used it for all kinds of shit, like this kind of shit that I do once a month, to scramble to find a replacement. So we might try some different things over the next couple of months. When we were talking before we went on the air, it was suggested maybe I could try just doing like a plain old private Hangouts call and then sort of piping it into my encoder and see how that works. So maybe we'll try that at some point. But for now, we're using the Lightstream platform, which seems okay, I guess. It's a little more complicated than the Google thing because I have to actually switch two people manually when they talk instead of having it just pop up naturally, like in a really nice intuitive way. Like
man!
That's
So
gotta be a
Steve,
pain in the tail.
We could always go to Roll20. That way, in the background, we could like draw dicks and.
Why just dicks? Why not boobs
That's
and
not.
vulvas?
I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Come on, guys. There's a lady present. Come on.
Yeah, come on.
And an MB, a male MB, but an MB, Menby.
A Menby is present. Yeah, a little decorum, please.
Yeah.
So if it's a little slow switching from speaker to speaker, that's completely my fault. But we'll see how this goes for the next hour or so. And if it turns out to be a total nightmare, I'll just do it. I'll do it a different way next time. But this is how we're doing it this time. So now that all that explanation / apology is out of the way, how's everybody doing?
Still thinking about how to bring about the end of capitalism and the dismantling of the state, as always. And hey, but I'm glad that David Koch is dead. That's like one.
That was some good news.
One down, one to go.
No, 2,152 to go, but one other Koch brother to go, and then the rest of the Koch family that will be the head of Koch Industries and continue Koch Industries. That's the word, always, and forever. As they funded also the far right, the Tea Party, and yes, and that's why we have the terrible politics that we have now.
That's the 2,000 something. That's the number of billionaires.
2,153. I just looked it up.
Good.
Well, how many billionaire energy executives that fund far right stuff do we need to get rid of? I think it's still at least like 5.
It's a lot.
Yeah. There was a Janet Meyer. I forgot she wrote the book Dark Money, the Society of Secret Billionaires, that were the people that basically funded like the Tea Party, like I said, because Obama got elected. That's what started it all. And then that's why in 2010 with the midterms, that was like that dramatic shift. And then we had the Republican Congress and Senate that stonewalled like anything that Obama tried to do, even just like order Grey Poupon on his like sandwich. It was Koch brothers.
Fucking snob.
Yes.
How dare he?
It was the Koch brothers, the Mercers, I think, and the Voss family, which is why I understand like what Joe was saying, that like the left needs like the left equivalent of the Tea Party. The left doesn't have money. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
We're
Tell that to George Soros.
Yeah. What about Soros?
Okay,
I'm
what
waiting on my
else?
Soros check. Hello.
Okay, what other like philanthropist billionaires are like help the funding the left, the far left, or like at least the Democrats? So like,
well, yeah. And even if Soros is funding like social progress forward, there's no way he's funding the end of capitalism.
Right. You wouldn't think so. You wouldn't think that would be high on his list of priorities. Let's get rid of the system that allowed me to accumulate all this wealth.
Exactly.
All the thing that allowed me to hoard all of this obscene amount of money. Let's get rid of it.
Charles Koch reported that his lieutenant will be taking over the Coke Industries, and they will still continue funding. So his death does nothing to stop the funding of the right. So while I don't like to dance on people's graves,
I'll do that.
In Samuel Alito's case, it was, or is it? Did I get the wrong name?
No, not Alito. What's?
Can't think of his name right
Edelson?
now.
See now it's like he died and I completely forgot what his name is. The one that.
But when he died, I was glad he was off the Supreme Court.
Okay.
Scalia?
Scalia. Yeah, Antonin Scalia.
When Scalia died, I was glad he was off the Supreme Court, even if I wasn't glad his family had to suffer necessarily. Same with David Koch. It's like, if it stopped the funding, then that would have been great, but it didn't. So we need to find other ways to do that.
Unfortunately, it's a case of meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Same shit, different day.
Yeah.
Well, also back to like some of our earlier conversations, some of which were off air. People seem to think is like, okay, this regime is terrible, it's fascist, and no argument there. But it's like we just got to get the right person in charge. We just got to get like a more generous CEO that's in the position of like the Shell companies who like stop what Shell is doing that was like for climate change and stuff like that. But in Dumpster Flower's video essay about like power, who has the power, he did point out to like a documentary where a bunch of protesters protested outside the CEO of the Shell gasoline company, demanding that he stop like a lot of the practices that he was doing to like perpetuate climate change. And it was a documentary all about it. And eventually, after like the protesting died down, the protesters just sitting down like having tea, and the CEO and his wife came out to have tea and spread cookies and actually have conversations with them. And the CEO said, listen, I agree with you guys. We got to stop climate change. And I love to do that on the show. The thing is, if I do start to do that, the board of directors will fire me and then put someone in place that will continue what they want to do. So thinking that like it's just one person or just like having the right person to like change the hands to like pass on the torch to like make the proper changes in some degree, yes, it could work. I mean, there's harm reduction, reform is the thing, regulations is the thing, but to get to the root of the problem, I don't think it's just enough to get like the right people in charge of those positions of power to like change those things. I would argue it's like, why do they have those positions of power in the first place, and can we do something to dismantle that to make the power be redistributed more equally, because things are just not equal right now. And
well, you're not. I mean, keep in mind, a corporation is not a democracy, and I mean, it's the golden rule. Then what the gold makes the rules, and the more gold you got, the more rules you can make. I want to throw in one other thing right now, because I'll be candid. This is just terrifying the crap out of me. And that is what's going on in Brazil right now, and more specifically the Amazon. I mean it when I say it. I am positively horrified that this is going on. And I mean, I'm scared for my daughter. I mean, as much as I'm scared for me, because she's going to inherit this shit. And I mean, can you replant a rainforest? I'm dubious.
Yeah, exactly.
You can replant it, but it's not going to be immediate by any stretch. It's going to take a long time, and scientists are saying they're hitting a tipping point where it's going to be very difficult to recover. And a lot of it is purposeful.
I mean, they want to clear the forest so they can, graze their graze their cattle and raise their own crops, and they fail to recognize that they're cutting off their nose to spite their face. And that's the other thing. You make a very good point, is that we were roughly 100 to 150 years getting to this point. And the hell of it is, and I don't think anybody's genuinely acknowledging it, if we go, balls to the wall on, a correction, it's probably going to be another 100 to 150 years getting it back, if it can be gotten back.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well, is that like, what can we do about Brazil. It's not that the Amazon is burning; it's being burnt, and
Exactly.
we know what's like what we should do, or it's like we feel powerless with this system, economic system, and the political system as it is. It's in like another country. What can
Well,
we do?
You've also got a jerk heading up Brazil who apparently can't. Yeah, he can't be bothered to fish. He finally put the army in there to supposedly knock down the fires, but I think he basically closed the barn door after the horse left.
Yeah, but even about the people of Brazil have to do within the political system, because Bolsonaro was in a way democratically elected. So there is something that the political system is also failing the Brazilians as well. Not to mention that the indigenous people that are going to be most affected by the Amazon rainforest being burnt, and the killings that are happening there, and it is genocide, because those people are forced from their homes and from where they live, and not surprising if it's not happening already. And so we all just feel powerless, which is why Philosophy Tube on his latest video essay kind of said this is like climate grief or climate despair, because it is haunting to find out, to realize there's almost nothing you can do. And for us, we only vote a year. Oh yeah, we write our representatives. Will they listen?
Yeah, good question.
Well,
Anybody here remember the comic strip Pogo? It's an oldie, but
I've heard of it.
Okay, go to Google and Google the following: we have met the enemy, and he is us.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, go ahead. Walt Kelly was political before it was popular to be political in comic strips, and he was brilliant, and he was just so much fun, and it was always lighthearted too, and I wish somebody would bring Pogo back because it was so good. Of course, Kelly's long since gone, sad to say.
Yeah.
Well, there is a distinction I want to make. There's nothing we can do, but there are things that can be done. If you look at the statistics, China and Hong Kong, somehow Hong Kong imports more Brazilian beef than the rest of China, but the two of them together make up over 50% of the cattle exports from Brazil. So if we can convince China to put sanctions on Brazil for their actions, that would have massive effect. Problem is, the U.S. isn't going to have any say in that, especially with our current trade war going on.
Yeah. And we could have been a good alternative to that.
Yeah.
And
that ship has sailed, apparently.
No kidding.
And then I would also point out here another ecological disaster that hasn't achieved much press at all is the Great Barrier Reef is dying.
Yeah. The coral reefs.
Yeah. Now, Australia is finally trying to do something about it, but it's going to hit them hard in tourism. Yeah. So of course since it means money to them, they're actually going to do it. Do something about it.
Yeah.
Well, the ocean temperatures are rising, and rising temperatures and coral reefs do not get along well.
Mm-hmm.
Capitalism will save the economy. Save the not economy, the Freudian
the ecology, maybe. And
ecosystem.
If you believe that one, I've got
once
a real
it hits their bottom line for the quarter.
Exactly. Yes. That's exactly right. It's, I think a lot of it is also, Geek brought it up a little bit when he mentioned Philosophy Tube's video where he talked about climate despair. Mm-hmm. I mean, that also reminded me a little bit of I think we have a real problem fathoming really, really, really bad things like this. Like when you think about the potential consequences of climate change, they're so catastrophic that I think a lot of people it flips some kind of switch in your brain, and you just don't accept it.
Well, yeah, people go into denial.
Yeah, exactly. You just think nah, forget that. I don't need to worry about that. It can't possibly be that bad, right?
Or we are so fucked that might as well just like read comic books or like watch movies. Hey, Spider-Man was within Rocket in the Endgame,
Right.
and that's not a spoiler. Or hey, She-Hulk is finally getting a TV series, and Moon Knight is getting a TV series.
Right.
But like, there is
Who
a
was it?
like,
Go ahead.
there is the thing is like I think there is a simple solution to that, but it's just one of the things that's easy to say. But I think the best step towards reversing climate change, because climate change is Ollie Thorne mentioned that like it just like affects everything else because of the rising sea levels, temperatures. There's less fish in the ocean, period, and that's going to decline rapidly as well. But then the fishing industry still needs to make money, because not only do the CEOs of those companies want their quarterly earnings, but also like they have mouths to feed for the middle managers and the ship captains. But there's less fish, so they have to like cut costs, and under capitalism, cutting costs is simply like reducing labor costs, like hiring migrant workers who are not going to like speak up for their workers' rights, not going to unionize because they're migrants and they'll be afraid of being deported. And so immigrant rights, workers' rights, and the ecology of like the oceans, all tied in together with climate change. It is one issue of climate change that affects everything else. It's also it affects all other issues of human rights.
Well, because if we don't have a civilization anymore, then the politics and the economy of our civilization don't really matter. Like, it affects everything,
you're
because it
rearranging
threatens everything.
You're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yes.
I probably brought this up before, but I think it's really on point right now. Who here? I mean, admittedly, it's not the world's greatest movie by 3 orders of magnitude, but who here has seen Tomorrowland?
No, I never got around to it.
I think
did
Jack Saints did a video on that and like say that it's fascist or like fascist leading? Maybe.
I don't think personally, I don't think it was myself, but I mean, it's trying to be hopeful in a lousy situation. But Hugh Laurie, towards the end of the movie, gives a great speech, and I've got it here, and I just wanted to relay it because it just kicked me in the teeth. Your earth was crumbling all around you. You've got simultaneous epidemics of obesity and starvation. Explain that one. Bees and butterflies start to disappear. The glaciers melt. Algae blooms. All around you, the coal mine canaries are dropping dead, and you won't take the hint. In every movement, there's a possibility of a better future, but you people won't believe it. And because you won't believe it, you won't do what's necessary to make it a reality. So you dwell on this terrible future. And here's the kicker right here. You resign yourself to it for one reason, because that future does not ask anything of you today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. That's it exactly. It's we're used to we have a coasting. That's a great way to put it. We have a really hard time like grasping long-term consequences, especially when the bill doesn't come due until after we're dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that it's difficult for us to view that as important.
Or even worse, in America, where half the country believes the world will end in our lifetime anyway.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, the second coming any day now.
Or also, there's another thing I think it is where it's just like Steve said, someone said in this call earlier that like it's hard to imagine the end of the world. I actually think that like people find it easier to imagine the end of the world or like a Mad Max kind of future, or like or Violence Jacks or Hawks of No Can, Fist of the North Star kind of future, as opposed to the end of capitalism. That's capitalist realism that Mark Fisher wrote a whole book about. They can't imagine an alternative to capitalism, because even when I suggest socialism, I've been told it's magical thinking. And I guess I'd much rather have like magical thinking, because that means I have superpowers then to imagine another way of governance, another way of having an economy that's more cooperative instead of competitive. because
And-
we all have to fight to survive. Which is like reminder, Steve, so far the charity links to like post in the description.
Yeah, I'll post them.
And speaking of capitalism, it's more than it's even worse than looking at what will happen outside of our lifetimes. The problem that you had mentioned with Shell and the CEO wanting to do the change but unable to because of the board comes down to a lot of the fact that we have things set up in corporations, and with corporations, the incentive models are all at the end of quarter. So it's not even what's bad for 100 years down the line. Like the choices they have to make to be profitable quarter by quarter are stuff that's bad like 9 months away, or
It's all short-term planning.
Yeah.
Even the governments will like will think
100%
that
agree.
even the governments will think that way too, because like, hey, if these tax cuts will cause a recession, hey, it'll be probably like someone else will be in the seat, or it's like, hey, I'm a lame duck, so why should I care? And so we only like we sometimes do change hands like every 4 years as well, and it's like we think like, oh yeah, this administration will get it all right, but there's a lot of like structures in place that like no, it's not easy for some anti-war candidate to come in and stop all the foreign like involvement that the U.S. government, that the CIA, the Pentagon, the State Department has been involved in around the world. Those entities will train the new president about the history of like all of the U.S.'s involvement in like South America and like the Middle East and like in China. If that president will listen, which wasn't the case this time, that's another problem. But even if like someone wants to be as like anti-non-intervention as possible, like anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism, there's been things already in place that like to change all of that will be tough to like to do. And plus, there's also the checks and balances in the system if they do actually like check and balance things.
Well, ultimately, I still think that the issue is personal involvement, when personal involvement is neither sexy nor is it especially attractive to a lot of people. And you combine that with, the people who are so convinced they need Jesus to take the wheel. I mean, I don't want to believe that we are well and truly fucked, but we may be well and truly fucked.
I think part of it is also, I don't know what you would call it. It's like, it's this mutated cultural form of object permanence, where like we think that the way things are is the way things are supposed to be, or the way things just naturally happen. Like there's this, I don't know, I'm not, I guess you would call it the appeal to naturalism, or or maybe like a natural state fallacy. Like we think that the way things are this way because that's just naturally the way they are. We don't think of it as somebody made things this way and we keep things this way because we continue to support things being this way in explicit and implicit ways. And that also works against us when we do actually accomplish significant change. We think of that change as being permanent too, which is why you have people, 50 years after the height of the civil rights movement saying like, well, didn't we fix racism in 1967? Didn't we fix racism back then? Like racism, we handled that already, because we assumed that, well, we did something about it back then. So that's been handled,
Well, it's a failure to acknowledge the fact that the only constant is change. And I mean, because people resist change, they don't want it to, they don't want to have to dance that dance, if you will. They don't want to have to adapt themselves to a changing situation. That's bad enough as it is. But I mean, now we're implementing changes that frankly could kill us, the bunch of us.
Yeah.
And again, as Governor Nix said in that speech, we don't want to acknowledge it because it would mean that we would have to acknowledge that we can fuck ourselves up past any chance of recovery.
Or what I've gotten a couple of times in discussions is people acknowledging it, but going, well, it's not as bad as it used to be. Which is even more frustrating because like
But like, don't forget that like every time that there is progress, there is backlash. Susan Faludi wrote a whole book of it. I have it right there on my desk, actually, because in the 80s, Reagan deregulated a lot of things and reversed a lot of like progress. And that's another thing with this back and forth, like Democrats, Republicans, Democrats, Republicans, or Labor Tories. It's just like, okay, I should participate in this process, vote in the right people. Well, voting is harm reduction, so I will still do that. And I should do that, but then it can easily change back as well. And also another thing that I want to bring up to speaking to the civil rights movement, it's kind of interesting how it's like in retrospect, in hindsight, oh yeah, the civil rights movement, for most everyone agrees, was a good thing. And so we have it in the textbooks and stuff like that. But it's always just like I had a dream speech instead of like the letter from the Birmingham jail.
Yeah.
Or we learned about like Martin Luther King, but not a Baron Rustin, or of like what the Malcolm X was doing, or of the Black Panthers, because we don't want to learn about the violence that was a significant part of the like civil rights movement. We don't learn about like how the Black Panthers were arming themselves at the start of the March for Washington. Instead, it was like Martin Luther King Jr. kind of like went to the head of the pack, and that's how the March for Washington ended up being like mostly peaceful afterwards. We don't learn about those things because the state or the powers that be don't want to learn people to know about how violence is sometimes necessary to like enact, to start change, to enact change. Hell, for the gay liberation rights movement as well, it started with a motherfucking riot at Stonewall, and it was the police that was harassing the attendants of Stonewall Inn, and it was weeks of harassment. Finally broke out into a all-out riot with everything being thrown, cop cars being turned over, and a couple of days of that, and then that started the gay rights liberation movement. So yeah, sometimes violence is necessary. I'm not saying that like peaceful protests can't work, but there's a time and place for every kind of like way of doing things. Because like it's kind of like the problem of like if you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Well, the thing is, too frequently, violence is a part of any major change in society. I mean, it was the same thing with the women's rights movements. It was the same thing with civil rights. And I mean, I theorized in a blog I wrote a couple of years ago that if atheists are genuinely going to come to the forefront, I mean, are we looking down the road at our own Stonewall?
Well, I think honestly, with the children in cages in the concentration camps, the Jews against hate are already doing this. They're already doing demonstrations outside those concentration camps. It's because if we don't do something like now, or like maybe pick our own like Bastille Day, as it were. Now, I'm not suggesting anything or like planning anything, because criminal anarchy is a thing in 13 states, including my state. Because I cannot actually lay out the plan of like how we're going to dismantle the state. No, it's like, it's against the rules in like my state and 12 other states in the books. But of course the state will want that to happen, because like why would the state want to like someone to like dismantle their own institution of power?
I mean, Trump was in this very, very simplistic terms, Trump was a reaction to Obama. But once we get whoever we get in there, and with any sort of like getting Trump's influence out of there, and frankly, getting him in jail, we are going to be living with the rats that came out of the wormwood, because they figured, hey, we got Trump, we're cool.
Yeah.
We're going to be
Also-
dealing with that for at least as long as Trump was in office, and probably a hell of a lot longer.
And what about the next Republican presidential candidate? What
Yeah.
Republican presidential candidate is going to come after Trump?
Yeah. Well,
we learned from Bush v. Gore that we all need to get out and vote, so that won't ever be
Yeah.
a problem again.
one sincerely hopes, except that
That was sarcasm.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
You couldn't
Because we
even
didn't
tell.
learn in 2016.
mhm.
You couldn't even tell.
Although personally, I'm probably more likely to give money towards Mitch McConnell's opponent than Trump's opponent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's a sort of a minorly hopeful point, though, and that is that there are at least a couple of Republicans coming out trying to primary Trump.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, Joe
Yeah, there was a
Walsh
guy-
and
Yeah, Joe Walsh, who was on ABC's This Week this morning, and I mean, he admits himself he was one of the guys that helped to invent Trump, and he's sort of doing one of these
yeah.
right about now. But him and, of course, Bill Weld. Now,
Yeah.
how much of a splash they're going to make, I'm dubious. But I mean, the very fact that you've got Republicans now finally, getting up the cojones to, look Trump straight in the eye and say, very simply, simple word, 2 letters, no.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's
I'll say get out.
yeah.
No. How many times have I got to tell you these guys? If you're going to be 2 words, it's "you're fired."
That's his line. He trademarked it though, or tried to, or
Yeah,
will try to.
He gets
Well,
a nickel every
thus
time
the
somebody
greater
says it.
irony.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's such a sad commentary on the state of the Republican Party and the state of our politics in general. Not, that the Republican Party is one of the 2 major parties in our country. That a Republican, even Joe Walsh is not like. I mean, he's a former 1-term congressman who now hosts a radio show, and he's a huge asshole. But the fact that he's willing to go like that, like, makes him suddenly one of the moral lights of the party. Because nobody else is doing that. Like, nobody else is even willing to say, "Oh shit, this guy is a disaster. This guy is a nightmare. He's unfit for the office in every way."
Even
and no
from
matter,
the people who were saying that during the primary.
yes,
All of those
And the hell of
people
it,
criticized
so was
Trump.
Ted Cruz, so was Bush.
yes.
I mean, so was practically everybody else on that dais when they were having the Republican primary debates in 2015, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
But
And then all of them turn around and march in formation, for crying out loud.
Because
It's ridiculous.
because party loyalty matters more for the GOP than to like actual principles, as it were. And hey, they apart from like the like healthcare, which they did do their best to try to get rid of, and like other things. Well, it's like mostly just like healthcare they failed to like do, but like for everything else, the deregulation, the tax breaks, 2 of them, and they got what they wanted. So
And the judges.
And the judges, yeah, and so they got all what they wanted. And if there's nothing in the system that is going to like dismantle that problem that we now have, maybe we should change the system or get a whole new system. I mean, also like with representative democracy, as it were, if this person like Adam Smith, my congressional congressman, he's supposed to represent me. He's supposed to be me in Washington to make all the decisions. How about I just vote? Whatever he's voting on, I'll just vote on that too. And it's like, but he's supposed to be just my representative, but a lot of other representatives, as honestly as Andrew, because no one is representing me, or for a few people representing me, except for maybe the squad. And so, and even the squad, it's like Nancy Pelosi says, like there are only 4 people, or 5 or 7 or something.
Yeah, they don't have a large following.
Yeah, in Congress,
Pelosi.
they don't have a large.
They don't have a large following in Congress, right? Yeah, well, it goes back to the Trump thing, and the old saying that Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line. And I think what you have to sort of the way it makes sense to me is, as far as in 2015, all of the other people, all of the other Republicans on stage being willing to go after Trump and being willing to call him out and oppose him, you have to sort of think, maybe that wasn't because they were all that upset by him.
They were in competition against him.
Well, and they didn't think he could win.
Yes.
If they thought that Trump had a shot of winning, then I don't think they would have gone after him quite as hard, and they would have been a lot quicker to fall in line after he got the nomination. Because you remember, even after he got the nomination, there were still people in the party, like major figures in the party, who were not embracing him. And it was only after he won the election that everybody was like, okay, well, now we have to put our differences aside and come together for the good of the country. And it's like,
compromise.
Yeah, exactly. And because they didn't think he was going to win. But now that he was the president, and now that they knew, like, oh shit, we got our guy in the White House, that's all they really cared about. And I mean, how else do you explain Ted Cruz becoming such a lapdog? The guy, I mean, Trump attacked him as hard as he attacked anybody, on a Democrat or Republican. Mm-hmm. I mean, he said the most horrible things about him and his father and his wife, and it's like, and now he's number one cheerleader in Washington. How else do you explain it except that Cruz, he really didn't care about any of that. He just wanted one of his team members to win the election, and if it was Trump, well, then it was Trump. Trump's my guy.
Even people like Lindsey Graham, who we were hoping to be a swing vote.
Yeah, exactly.
A couple of years later, you're like, what happened? It's like, as soon as John McCain died, he was like, okay, fuck it, I'm not going to be that anymore.
I have a delivery of Kool-Aid from Lindsey Graham.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
In government, what do you call it? Supporters on the ground. I knew. I used to work. Well, anyway. Former coworker of mine now, that during the 2016 election, essentially, justified her thing as like her vote for Trump as, it was, I felt that he was the lesser of two evils. I had to pinch my nose and do it. And then during the essentially the 28 or right before the 2018 election, with the upper, when people were panicking about the caravan or making it a big deal, she had messaged another coworker who was essentially, saying it's like, they're people, you shouldn't be like this. And she had sent the message like, well, if they're just people, I hope your children get raped or something like that. Like, oh my God. And this, and mind you, this is a person who worked with the what do you call it? Special needs,
developmentally disabled,
30 years, and showed empathy her whole life with these people, and then can't even show a shred of empathy for people who are fleeing from war. I hate it so hard.
Welcome to the wonderful world of compartmentalization, because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah,
I mean, because you got these guys over there, you got these guys over here, and never the twain shall meet.
It's dehumanizing. It's othering.
That's exactly what it is. Yes.
Some people are just like so used to, like, especially when you think of like those people, one thing, and then they're illegals. And so, and that's a whole nother thing. And even when you tell them, no, they're seeking asylum, that's perfectly legal. The first step in order to seek asylum is to come to the U.S. or come to any like asylum seeking country. That's the first step, not go to the embassy of like the country you're from. No, go directly to the country. Yeah. And the reason why we have that process with the UN Charter that we all agreed to is that because of World War II. Because of the Jewish refugees and the mass refugee crisis that happened in Europe. And again, it wasn't a refugee crisis that Europe was having. Europe was having a problem with all the refugees coming in that they didn't want to come in. And because so many people were turned away from that, because no one wants those people to come here.
Yeah,
it caused a lot of like hardship. And so that's why the UN Charter is for seeking. It's perfectly legal to seek asylum. Come to this country and say you're seeking asylum. Then that's what you do. And yet, so many people just don't realize that because propaganda, because of like mass media, Fox News, or just like state powers, they say that they are illegals, and so then it others them, it dehumanizes them. That's just, and it's like I had these conversations with like some of my coworkers as well, and you're just thinking like, wow, it's not too once you label someone as illegal or a group of people as illegal, it's not too far to like say other words of like criminals as well.
Yeah. You know, they bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're racists. Do these words sound familiar?
Rapists.
And at this point, I mean, Trump is basically looking to cut off immigration to this country altogether, unless you're incredibly smart or incredibly rich. Bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses who can stand on their own 2 feet. Come on.
Yeah,
please.
yeah, exactly. I was listening to the radio yesterday, I think. I was listening to NPR, and because I'm a white liberal person and by law I have to listen to NPR.
Welcome to the club.
I'm not listening to NPR. What's wrong with me then? I just listen to Democracy Now! This occasionally, or Algebra English,
or sometimes I listen to my YouTube music playlist. If I don't feel like engaging with the real world.
I also listen to Audible Anarchist. My interrupt you. I'm sorry.
but anyway, and they actually the reporter during the course of a story, they were talking about the recent changes or the proposed changes in immigration policy from the Trump administration, like making it more difficult for green card holders who have taken public benefits to remain in the country, and the reporter said very, very matter-of-factly, so much so that I almost missed it. He said the Trump administration, or Trump has made decreasing all forms of immigration a priority of his presidency, which is true, but I'd never heard it said so simply, so unqualified before, where because Trump and his people say, well, we don't have a problem with immigration, we have a problem with illegal immigration. But if you look at
such a hollow statement,
if you look at the actual policies that they're putting forward, they're trying to cut back on all forms of immigration. They don't want anybody to come,
well,
except maybe from Norway, right?
Yeah. And even something relatively uncontroversial like DACA, which was favored by the majority of Americans, yet somehow Congress thinks it's controversial. I mean, at one point, Democrats were even willing to give him some wall funding to get DACA back.
Compromising, which is
but they still wouldn't go for it, even though everyone would be fine with it.
Yeah.
What do you call it? And with not attacking or not following the current labor rules to punish these sorts of people that do abuse, the cheaper labor of illegal migration.
Yeah.
Not going that, one could even argue that he's doing more to stop legal immigration than he is to fight illegal immigration.
That's another thing about why are the migrants coming here? Why are those countries are being war torn? Well, the Monroe Doctrine kind of like it was set up in like the 1950s by the CIA, where basically said maybe whereas like the U.S. government has the right to go into any other country to like stomp out communism. So that was their justification: going to Guatemala, going to like Chile, going to like Argentina, I think, like go to a whole bunch of like Venezuela, or do other things, if not like CIA-backed coups, or like putting in like dictatorships like Pinochet, or also sanctioning those countries, make it more difficult for those countries, for the people of those countries, to economically have money so they can buy food, rent, and all that stuff. That's apparently all behind by hey, well, even though there's necessities of life, I will constantly hammer that thing home until that all changed. So they have to they don't have work or don't have good work where they are, so they'll go to where their work is, and so they'll cross the border into the U.S. We do cause this problem, especially since there's always been free movement of people in a way, because there's always free movement of corporations. Right. And according to Citizens United, corporations are people. And so there's free movement of capital and always have been, but those things don't want free movement of people. And the same thing with Brexit and the EU. And hey, Nick joined us, who looks very, very tired.
I'd be curious to know, has there been any effort at all yet to prosecute the employers whose employees were jumped on a couple of, about a week ago that they had that massive raid?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about, the last I heard about that, I read an article on the Washington Post about it, I guess yesterday, but it was published a little bit before, where apparently nobody knows anything about what's going on with that. Like there are some people who were arrested as a part of those raids who have been released, and others who are being indefinitely detained, and nobody can figure out why certain people were released and why certain people are still being held. And as far as I know, there's been no, they're certainly not going after the employers. Which is par for the course, but
you steal big. If you cause the 2008 crash, at least in the U.S., you don't go to jail. Sometimes you get bailed. If you cause Enron collapse, who has been gone in jail for that? It's just in this society you steal big because he who makes the gold makes the rules, and you're guilty until you prove wealthy.
Yeah, exactly.
Now that's a new one. I have not heard that one.
That's a good one.
Yes,
that's a good one.
I think I stole that from Bill Maher because it was about OJ at the time.
Well, I'm going to give you credit for it.
Yeah. Speaking of which, if any of you want to see one of the best burns I've ever seen on Trump, you need to take a look at it was 2 days ago. New rule when Maher offers to vote for Trump.
Oh, I saw people tweeting about that, but I didn't watch the video.
Watch it, but wear a kidney belt when you watch it. You will want that kidney belt.
I'm sorry, but can we just all drop Bill Maher? He's a douche. He's one of these bro-aggressives. So sure, in the 90s he was more a liberal, so he was leftist center, so he was good politics against George W. and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But so he was of the left in the 1990s or 2000s. But when the change happened, that the left movement has gotten more representation from people of color, from queer people, from women, and they were becoming the leaders of those movements. Bill Maher, TJ Kirk, Greg Armour Skeptic, H3H3. There's a whole lot of people that you can put in this camp of these bro-aggressives, where it's sure, okay, they're maybe for UBI, they're maybe for Medicare for all, they're maybe for all those things, but anything on social justice matter, they'll be complaining about college campuses, they'll complain about Black Lives Matters and blocking traffic. Oh, what if an ambulance need to go through there? And it's the same line. So there's so many
the lives
of these
hypothetical people.
Lots of hypothetical people. So I say I'm done with Bill Maher. It's just I say we drop him.
Pardon me, but I like Bill Maher.
And
I mean, as soon as Bill Maher said trans rights were a boutique issue, I'm done.
Yeah,
Yep.
he said trans
He
rights is a
did.
boutique issue. So it's
Okay.
like,
Well, and he also had Milo Yiannopoulos on for
Yeah.
Yes.
not just not just
Horrible.
not just
Yes.
a chat, but like a very very friendly chat where he talked him up. I think didn't he compare him to Hitchens? He said he was like a
compared
young
him to
gay
Hitchens,
Christopher Hitchens. I was
And
like, what
when
the-
Milo said he was trying to protect women from like mentally ill men trying to go in the restrooms, Bill Maher went, "That's fair."
yes,
Yes,
exactly. The
sure.
Yeah, no, I can't abide.
Let me try this one out on you. I mean, he had. I'll stipulate he had him on once. The question is, will he have him back? I'll bet not.
I hope not, but I mean, you
well,
know,
because I mean, he brings on what's her name, Cup, all the time.
SC
and
Cup,
I mean, yeah, and I mean, I'm sorry, I've seen dog turds that are more useful than she is.
Oh, she's
but every I mean, she finds a bone every so often. I mean, one of the most, I hate to admit it, when Coulter called for Trump, and he actually had her on not very long after that. I mean, I thought that was an important conversation. And I hate Coulter with a royal freaking passion, and yet she had some honest and real data to contribute there. And I mean, call me crazy, and I'll just sort of go, yeah. But I mean, sometimes it's important to hear these guys. Now, Milo, poop on him. But as I said before,
to hear if he pushed back.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that's the thing. He was saying that he agreed with Milo, and he was calling trans rights a boutique issue.
Yeah,
these are why I have problems. If he had Milo on to tell him why he was wrong, I still think he's platforming a bad person, but at least pushing back.
Yeah, well, you know, I had a similar frustration with Stephen Colbert a couple years ago, who I absolutely adore. Like, I love Stephen Colbert. I think he's hilarious. I think most of the time he does important work and, is on the side of the angels, so to speak. But I saw him give an interview after because he hosted the Emmys, I think last year or the year before, and they did a comedy bit with Sean Spicer. And everybody was very rightly pissed off about that, because I guess it must have been 2 years ago.
Right after he got fired.
Yeah, this was 2 years ago. Then it was right after Spicer left the White House, and he came on stage and he made some joke about how it was the most watched Emmys episode ever, and everybody was like, Jesus Christ, like, do we have to do this? Do we have to bring Trump's original Joseph Goebbels on for a laugh? Right.
Okay, I gotta look up Joseph Goebbels.
If you really want to laugh, tune to ABC and Dancing with the Stars.
Dancing with the Stars. My video for Wednesday contains a little mini rant about that. That I felt I wrote my video for Wednesday is mostly about just kind of a general topic about how we shouldn't give people the option to just not care about stuff. But in the middle of it, I had to, after I saw the Spicer Dancing with the Stars news, like I kind of had to add this little mini rant in the middle of it and be basically like, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Like, this guy is one of Trump's people who helps to write Trump's narrative, and he gets fired or quits or whatever. And sure, let's just have him on our show for a bit of fun. Like, what the hell is going on? And Colbert,
they're normalizing the horrible things that the Trump administration kind of does, or the people who work for him, or like people who are cheerleaders for him, I guess until recently Coulter, but still, even if Coulter has turned on Trump, still it's just for being anti-Trump. That's like the bare minimum of basic human decency.
I mean, if you're going to normalize these guys, what you do is you do what Sarah Huckabee Sanders does, and she goes over to Fox as a commentator. But of course, Fox is a garbage bag for those kind of people to begin with.
Fox is Trump TV already.
Of course it is. Always was.
But back to like Stephen Colbert for just a second. He is much
Yeah.
better than like Bill Maher in a lot of respects, but like he's still liberal, so it's like he's good for him being anti-Trump as a lot of people. But Stephen Colbert also did like I remember I have to look this up to confirm this, but I think he did like a kind of like tweet of like, oh come on, please people, don't like do that to like Tucker Carlson, because like it's saying about like how people were kind of like outside Tucker Carlson's like house and like throwing eggs or something like that, or just like showing their discontent. Stephen Colbert had shown some solidarity to Tucker fucking Carlson, the white supremacist on TV. He was worse than Bill, the previous guy. Oh damn it! No, O'Reilly. That's what the sexual harassment. At least O'Reilly countered white supremacists. Tucker Carlson's not doing that, and in fact, he's very, very, very effective at being like a millionaire, as being like a mouthpiece for billionaires, distracting the populace or the viewers of Fox News from the actual issues going on, and instead just like talk about trees being renamed in a certain state. Then the SJW is going out of hand.
Yeah. Yeah, Tucker Carlson is one of those who, I mean, this is, I mean, it's not a new act because David Duke used to do the same thing when he was the leader of the KKK, where that you would make no effort at all to not be a racist, but you would just say that you're not. And you would just expect people to believe you. Like that's what Tucker Carlson is doing. He says he's not a white nationalist, right? But he makes no effort whatsoever to not be one. He just says, "Oh, come on. I'm not a white nationalist." And you call everybody that. You're just trying to silence people on the right. But he still dehumanizes immigrants. He still dehumanizes black folks. He still dehumanizes non-white people just in general, and tries to point fingers and scapegoat and do all the stuff that white nationalists do. But you know, he does. But if somebody makes that accusation, as happened recently, you know, he'll say like, "Oh, that's ridiculous. Of course I'm not racist. Of course I'm not a white nationalist."
Did you notice that I think Trump may have picked up on his that's only anti-Semitism in your mind kind of crap.
Yeah.
I would kill to see I would kill to see a reporter come right back to him and says, "Yeah, in my mind, in somebody else's mind, in the mind of the guy over there,
exactly.
in the mind of about 330 million people in this country. What's the matter with your mind, asshole?"
Yeah. He's like, well, and it's like, you know, anti-Semites have been trying to hide by saying they're not anti-Semites for pretty much the whole history of anti-Semitism. I mean, that's an old trick.
That's why TJ Kirk's saying that like, I can't be racist. I'm not like a KKK. I'm not a outright like white supremacist and stuff like that. Well, white supremacists don't be outright about that. It's kind of scary that now Proud Boys are probably going to go to like Portland and just like do a demonstration. And I guess the police are also protecting them since Antifa showed out in force. Of course, the age of the Portland comrades like Jamie.
I went through a lot of this with a conversation with my mother a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Where a couple of things she said, I couldn't get mad because I could not believe what she just said. And it was like, we went down this. Well, it's like we went down this road where it's like, you know, I'm not part of the KKK, so I'm not a racist. But then I pointed out, like, you know, growing up, there were a lot of times I remember if you had a negative experience with someone, you always tended to go out of your way to mention that they were black.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, seriously.
Exactly.
So I just started pointing out all these little things growing up that, you know, I picked up on, like just you going out of your way to mention that. And one time she said, and I'm not making this up, she said, prejudice against people of certain ethnic backgrounds is not racism.
Oh.
And I just
here's my reaction.
Wait, whoa. It isn't that sort of like the definition of racism?
Yeah.
Hello?
But it's like she only knows the institutionalized.
Only the dictionaries.
Pretty much that's the only one she'll accept. So I'm saying, and I just kind of sat there dumbfounded when she said it. Like,
oh my god, that is well, you know what it's like you know, about what 8 or 9 years ago now when they were having all those town hall meetings about the Affordable Care Act, and that person said, "Keep your government hands off my Medicare." It's like you have misunderstood the concept you're arguing about so fundamentally.
They did not know that the Affordable Care Act was Obamacare. They were against Obamacare, but they were for the that's state propaganda, or like Fox News propaganda that's so effective to those people.
Yeah, they would support individual elements of it if asked. If they itemized it and said, "Are you in favor of this, this, and this?" they would say, "Yeah." But if you said, "Oh, what about Obamacare?" they would say, "No, absolutely not." Yeah, and with racism,
true for socialism, honestly. If you say like democracy in the workplace, so like everyone gets like a home, food, water, access to home, food, water, shelter, that's all guaranteed, provided by society. If you say all these things that's socialism is kind of about, democracy at the workplace is the biggest one, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I like that. Like if finally democracy at the workplace, I get to have control out of something that takes up 40 hours a week of my life, 8 hours a day, like 1/3 of my life, or maybe more if people are working overtime or multiple jobs, because that's what people need to do in order to survive here." They will love that. But when you say it's like socialism, oh, whoa, that's Marxist talk, that's commie talk. They seem to be against that.
You're right. We do respond much more strongly to the buzzword that we've sort of been trained to react to than to the actual content of the concept.
Yeah, and I even almost, and slightly paraphrasing what I told my mother, I'm like, "Okay, how would you like me to label your bigotry?"
Right? Yeah, exactly. Like exactly. What do you want me to call it? Yeah. If racism isn't the word that you're comfortable with, what would you like me to call it?
Yeah. I'm not a white nationalist. I'm a white identitarian. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's where alt-right comes from.
Yeah.
They wanted to come up with a different name.
Maybe he's a white washer.
Oh.
I have my moments.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Okay,
I just got that actually.
We've been going for an hour, so I'm not going to press my luck too much. I'm going to wrap this up. But I did want to mention, because Some Random Geek is always kind enough to put together like a sort of rough show format for us. I wanted to draw everybody's attention once again to the charity links, which I notice in the Google Doc there are a couple that I have to add that aren't in the description at the moment. So I will add those as soon as we're off the air here. And also I want to remind everybody about the Social Justice Alchemy channel.
Oh, thank you, Steve.
Absolutely. Hey, I'll do your job. And also our friend Nick, who is a patron of mine and joins us a lot. He tried to come in a couple of times during our broadcast here and was having technical difficulties, I guess, and he never quite made it in and looked very frustrated. I don't know what the problem was, Nick. I couldn't figure it out for you.
I just hope it wasn't my conversation about bringing up socialism and communism, because that seems to have the effect on my coworkers and family members.
He had his head in his hands, like, oh god. So maybe that was it, but I don't think so. Though.
Maybe he's fighting a headache too.
Yeah, maybe so. But I wanted to make sure to plug Nick's comic Planet Ripple. You can read that at planetripple.com. It's really, really awesome. And Nick's a good guy. And I'm sorry he wasn't able to join us this time, because I saw him trying in vain, unfortunately. So that's it. I think this went pretty well. At least it went pretty well from my end. I'll have to watch the stream and see how it played. But I was checking in on it here and there, and it seemed to be okay. So thanks, everybody, for joining me for this experiment. We'll maybe try it a different way next time if I can figure out something that might be a little easier. But this seemed to work okay. So thanks to everybody for joining me. Thanks to everybody here for being my patron. Thanks to everybody for watching. Patreon.com/Steve Shives if you want to help out and help me continue to do all of this that I do on YouTube. And don't forget the charity links. And that's it. We'll see you next month. Take care, everybody.